I'm just going to start by saying I have not been this uncomfortable reading a chapter of a book in a very long time.
This chapter is called God's Gift to Man, and it starts off with a photo of Maribel Morgan holding her book, The Total Woman. And this chapter basically talks a lot about, like, it's honestly, it's not like chronologically next after the chapters we read. Some of it's concurrent, but more so focused on what is happening in term. This feels more like, you were talking about the political versus the local. This feels more like talking about the local part when we've been talking about the political. And it's kind of like, and here's what was happening on home base that was making everybody want to drink this, like, kind of a thing. And so that's kind of where we start. And like, her like premise of this book, it says basically the problem is us, because of course it is. So it's women not giving it to their husbands and catering and just like basically boosting his ego all the time and just like being resistant to her role that she's supposed to have. And I looked it up. It was $15 for the course. That was like $100 back then.
Oh, geez.
So the fact that it was that high demand and people were doing that and it was $100, like, that tells you something.
Well, the fact that professional football teams were willing to send the wives of their players because they thought, oh, maybe there's a connection, because the 72 Dolphins, they sent a bunch of their wives down and then they went undefeated the next year. That sounds absurd to us, and as a sports fan, I always joke, and I borrow this phrase from a friend of mine. I'm not superstitious, I'm just a little stitious.
Yeah,
and that's kind of what's going on here. But it's like, no, this is wholesale, just indoctrination, brainwashing. And that's, back to I just felt icky about this. I understand the author and their intent here, but like the chapter title alone made me just go ew, because I knew exactly what I was getting ready to read.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is because I'm now at a point and I'm now at a place where I read these things and I hear these thoughts and immediately I know something is wrong. And I know that this isn't right. I know that this is not what was intended. I know that this is not even close to how the church should act.
Right.
And I think that's why I feel so icky about this, is because this is a reality that, was not introduced all that long ago and is still very prevalent in certain circles. And yet here we are trying to claim all of these things of a transformative work of the church. And yet this exists and is honestly used pretty regularly by a whole lot of Western evangelical cultures.
I'm going to challenge you on that, because I was just getting ready to talk about why I felt validated and you felt icky. And does it make you feel icky that this ickiness is set up to benefit you? Not you specifically, but you know what I mean.
I know. Yeah. No, I'm a white heterosexual male. I like literal epitome of privilege. I understand.
And if not, that's fine. But I do wonder.
Maybe if it's it would be subconscious. It was not the first thought. If that is there, my initial thought of like why this is icky to me and why this is just like, heck yeah, this is, again, every man's gift from God or whatever. It's, God's gift to every man, or, but it feels wrong even me saying that. It feels gross having those words come out of my mouth.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's also just this element of this that it's not, yes, it's meant to benefit men, but it also kind of does y'all a disservice of like, you're just dumb, like idiots
roar.
I am man and I cannot control myself. I have no higher thinking. I will just fall into bad habits because if I don't get exactly what I want and need, that's just going to happen. I have no control, and it's on you to manage that for me. That's not a lot of agency in your own life, or a not very highly developed prefrontal cortex, to be quite frank. So I don't feel like that's super doing you guys a credit in that telling of who we are to each other as, the different genders. So stay-at-home wives lived in fear. This was a thing I had to untangle in my 20s.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, somehow that idea of that responsibility of if I didn't live up to a certain standard of just behavior, especially like being leading a youth group and talking about those kinds of things and being newly married and thinking about all those things you've been taught forever and ever and just trying to like figure out how they line up in your daily life and being like, oh God, but what if I can't be perfect all the time? Like, then it's just his right to go off and do whatever. And that was ridiculous, but it was real.
Yeah.
It was a real like untangling of that stuff. I think we talked about it, but I think I also just had to logic it out for myself of like, does that make any sense? Like, step away from this, look at it like as the people that you are. What? And having to put it back into the context of like, I can't imagine any actual loving couple that I know that being a thing that could exist in that relationship as well. You know what I mean? Like she doesn't behave the way that he exactly wants or needs, and it's his every right, and he might just haul off and go sleep with his secretary. That just doesn't make any sense, but that's what's coded so heavily, and it's insane. I'm not old. Like, you know what I mean? I'm not like in my feels like this wasn't
Yeah.
taught to me like a million years ago. It was taught to me. Like, it's very much that kind of transactional mindset of, yeah, it's just like, that doesn't sound great. And then other people kind of start writing their own books based off of these things, which, like, by the way, based on what? Like, can we just talk about the fact that people just buying these books that these thoughts are just coming out of these people's heads and it's like fine? Based on what? Like, founded on what? You like are citing what exactly? And we've founded an entire Judeo-Christian culture on these women's thoughts that they thought would fix their own personal problems because maybe their husbands were jerks.
So
Like,
I wondered about this because on the very first page of this chapter, it even says that this particular text, this book, I don't even want to call it a text. This book was written and they only printed 5,000 copies. And yet by the end of all of this, it was like 500,000 copies had been sold.
yep.
So if you're only starting out with 5,000 copies, how in the world does it explode into this gargantuan national, in chain of teachings and books and writings and conferences and all these things? Like, without knowing for sure, my first immediate thought is some guy got his hands on this and went, oh, this is going to be great, and went to the right people and did the right marketing and did all of that. Again, to bring up the sports analogy, like these other guys saw that, oh, look at what this did for my multi-million-dollar football team. Now there's 30 other teams in the league that are going to say, well, if it worked for them, maybe we should do it too. And it's a direct, and again, you talk about transactional. It is, in my mind, and this may not be true, but this is how I'm assuming this happened. Men looked at this and said, oh, I can see how that's going to benefit me in XYZ. Not caring about what it was going to do to their spouse, not caring what it was going to do,
it's
in
good
any
for
way.
me.
Right.
That was 100% it.
And that seems to be very much a part of the culture, especially in the 70s, when we are seeing this huge uptick of, and this was briefly mentioned. I actually wish the author of Jesus and John Wayne would go a little bit more in depth at this point. Culturally, what is going on in the 70s at this point, like with the political upheaval, with cultural upheaval, all of that, men are trying their best to hold on to their places of power. Here we are 50 years later, and they've done a pretty good job of it, unfortunately. But there are systems that are in place that they are seeing. And this is, I think, what I was trying to say earlier. They have seen what might have started off as this woman with 5,000 copies of this book and said, ooh, we can make that work to our advantage. Let's fan the flames and let's make this a part of our agenda. And the next thing you know, 500,000 copies have been made.
Yeah. I think it generally just started creating demand because who had the income, who had the you know what I mean? Like, who had the purse strings in those days?
Right.
Who was holding the money? It was the men, and this book was going to benefit them. It's the same reason we don't have this. Is gonna maybe make people feel weird, but I don't care. But it's true. This is the same reason that we have medicated birth control that's like firing a loaded gun at a shield instead of taking the bullets out of the gun, because men got queasy one time and gave up on the study. Meanwhile, the side effects of the birth control that it was approved for women to deal with So that there could be no consequences to whatever wants to be done. Absolutely ridiculous. But that's where we're at. Like, I mean, there is more. I should look this up, and I will look it up and correct it if I'm wrong. But there's been more money spent on erectile dysfunction medication than on all of women's health issues.
Yes, that is a statistic that I've seen numerous times. So
Yeah.
I just looked up because you were asking about the purse strings and who's holding the money and all of this. Interestingly enough, the year that the Crazy Ladies book, the Total Woman, the year that became a bestseller was also the year that Congress passed an act which allowed and guaranteed women the right to go get a mortgage without a co-male signer.
So we're fighting back.
Yeah, and I mean, literally, that's like, you're talking about, who's controlling the money, who's controlling the power. Like, women were allowed to own property, but they couldn't. There was no guarantee that they could go out and buy property. Like, and this was just 50 years ago from when you and I are having this conversation. Like, this is something. So literally at the same time that this book is coming out saying, women, you are subservient to men, you are less than, you are all of these things, they are looking at culture, and culture is saying, hey, we're going to try to help you here a little bit, and enshrine something that will at least protect you in some way. And again, that particular act is there's still some issues with it, but I remember reading about it and learning about it. But like, these things are happening at the same time. Like, this is literally the church saying, no, we don't want this. Like, whoa, this is,
there's going to be single adult women because they don't have to live with their parents now. Whoa.
Right. And what happens? What does single adult women not do? They don't have babies. They don't have families. They don't have all of these things that play into the systems and the roles of the church and the political spectrum. Opinions. I know. Well, and it's, again, what is it? God's gift to man. Okay.
I don't know if you've seen the Reese Witherspoon like speech clip where she's talking about the trope of like, in every major like action movie or something, there's a woman that turns to a man and says, what do we do? And it's like, literally, when has a woman in crisis ever stopped and turned to a man and asked what to do and not already been trying to fix the thing?
Right.
So, and we were watching Interstellar the other night at a movie night thing, and literally they're in space. This woman has multiple PhDs, and Anne Hathaway says, what can I do, to Matthew McConaughey when everything is falling apart? I was like, oh no, she did the thing. I'm like, really? So it's like, she had more NASA training than he did, I feel like, at a certain level, at least for the mission they were on. But what can I do? And like, it's so weird. And it's like, there's just like so many other iterations that like kind of fell down after this woman's book. Like, but you're right. Like, I do think the reason it probably spiraled was because that was happening. People were afraid that their foundation of the way of life was being threatened because women had options. And like, well, maybe make it a little better, and then she won't pick a different one. But like, I mean, that's part of it too. But like, and then I think that this is where it did get interesting. So when we do finally get kind of over to, what is her first name? Her last name is Elliot, but what is her? Elizabeth Elliot.
Elizabeth,
She says the very notion of hierarchy came from the Bible.
Nope,
and now you can't see my face now if you're watching listening to the audio version, but I'm making a face. And a hierarchical order of submission and rule descended from the nature of God himself. And I went, what?
Yep, nope.
Yeah, nope. That's what I starred the sentence. Within the Trinitarian God then existed the elements of rule, submission, and union. Oh.
Yep, nope.
I didn't even go to school for this, and I mean,
well, let me tell you, I did go to school for this, and the number of heresies that I underlined just in that paragraph alone. it was
just and legitimate authority, willing and joyful submission. No, it was being in the very nature God. He was God. They were equal. They were the same.
The closest that, and again, this is where like I think it's language is very dangerous, both in a positive and a negative way. Here, if I were to talk about the Trinitarian, so what we call it the economy of the Trinity. It's the way that the persons of the Trinity interact with one another, and there is mutual submission. There is this connection in that way. but it is not this subservient hierarchy of
Yeah.
Father, Son, Spirit. Like this is, and again, it's one of those things that we don't have the language for, because we can't comprehend a completely what's the best way of putting this, a complete reliance upon one another to the point in which you would cease to exist if the other was not there.
The purposefulness of the Holy Spirit as an intercessor doesn't work if God, the hierarchical alleged, does not submit to what the Holy Spirit has to say, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
It's
it's a
so the
thing I've never thinked before. Like, like it makes sense.
yeah. So those two, again, that whole paragraph, like you should have seen me. I about threw the book at one point in my office.
I mean, it's pretty much all underlined in mine too.
So it's going back to what I had mentioned earlier, of the helper, the woman in the garden being created, and the word that is there, the phrase is ezer kenegdo, and it's this beautiful rendering and this understanding of, again, this reliance upon one another, in which the other is not whole without the other. And it's not saying it's that's culturally that can be a whole lot even today, especially a theology of singleness. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying here is it's the way that the helper, that Adam and Eve are connecting in this way,
The
is the
existence of the
intention.
genders. Yeah,
Correct.
it's not about the pair, really.
Right. And that's so, like, when they talk about, like, well, this is the biblical marriage and it's all the way back to Adam and Eve and blah, 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 and all this. And I'm just like, whoa. If you're going to use a biblical resource to talk about that, it is definitely not Adam and Eve. Especially when you look at the original language, it's Adam, which means human. And that word is used to describe both Adam and Eve. So it's Adam and Adam. And it's like, wait a minute, hold on a second. So they're the same, but different. Distinct. Yeah. And so it's a really intriguing thing for her to just say, well, it's in the Bible, and then to turn around and say the very next line of, like, well, this is how the Trinity works. And again, I went to school for this, and I was like banging my head against a wall. It's like, that is not even remotely close to how the Trinity works, and continues to work.
And that's honestly most of the time the people that want us to read, I feel like that say we're not respecting the authority of the Bible, maybe is a better way to put it. Most of the time, the people that are telling us we should be letting that solely inform have not read it in a contextual, interpreted way at all, or a very limited one, or a misinterpreted one.
Yeah, and never mind the fact that, you and I cannot read scripture in a modern context without taking in all of our perceptions, all of our preconceived notions about it. I cannot read scripture at face value because I'm an American citizen, a white heterosexual male, and I have a life worth of experience that I'm taking into these readings. And so that I cannot separate myself from that. I will read a passage of scripture, I will read the exile of the Hebrews very differently than a person of color who has experienced horrendous things because of their skin color. The exile itself means something very different to someone who has been exiled versus me, a person of privilege. And it's one of the things that drives me nuts. It's one of those things that I wish, there's a wonderful book out there by a theologian named Al Truesdale, and it's called Square Peg: Why Wesleyans Aren't Fundamentalists.
Okay, we just talked about this on Sunday. I don't know if I told you this. I started a book club.
Okay.
On Hillary McBride's book that just came out, Holy Hurt.
Oh, yeah.
About religious trauma. And we only did the intro and just like introductions to each other because actually none of the people really know each other or me. They follow me on Instagram. That is their common denominator. And we were talking about that, and I think Matt and Micah brought up that book, and it's not who we were supposed to be, but we let more of it seep in than we think we did.
Oh yeah.
And because of our unwillingness to acknowledge our existence outside of our four Nazarene walls, most of the week we're existing in a cultural context that is steeped in this division and this incorrect, like, inequality that we don't bother to untangle when we come back in those doors.
Yeah.
Like, we let so much of it subliminally like ruin lives, honestly. Like
it's
cause
festering.
trauma and
Yeah.
cause damage and make people like me think that they're wrong for existing this way and like not being this like little soft-spoken whatever because I have thoughts and opinions and they're my own. And so like it's I think that there's your point about not being fundamentalist, but I think we didn't check it in a lot of ways. And so
And still
this
aren't.
stuff 100% still aren't. 100% still aren't. Yeah.
And that's much of why I'm wanting to have these conversations. Is I have seen over the better part of the last decade plus in ministry now, so many of these thoughts run rampant, and people claim them as this. Again, within my denomination, we are a member of the Wesleyan Holiness denomination, or a Wesleyan Holiness denomination. I've seen so many things claimed as, well, this is who we are, and I'm just sitting here going, no, it's not. That's not at all what it means to be Nazarene. That's not at all what it means to be Wesleyan. That's not at all what it means to be Methodist. That's not, all of these things. Like, there are denominations out there that believe that, and that's, that is, it is what it is. I hate that there's nothing else that, we can't really have that conversation in this way. But for us to stand idly by and to look and to see a huge portion of our churches be relegated to a subservient role, to a subservient standard, to a less than identity is just wrong. And we have to be better. We have to stand up. We have to be able to have these conversations and say, no, this is not biblical. Crazy lady who wrote a book back in the 70s. This is not how the Trinity works. Crazy lady. This is instead just purely antithetical to the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yeah. No, it's
I'm just preaching now.
It's I would argue people gonna get mad about this maybe.
Ooh, spill it. Do it.
I think it's worse. I think that okay. Obviously I grew up Nazarene, but I would argue this for any denomination that ordains women and allows women to be in leadership, but does not check themselves on sexism or talk about it or have measures in place to like be working on it and undoing it and like watching out for those biases. So you ordain and you say you're fine with women in leadership, and I use that word that way intentionally, but you don't ever talk about gender issues or do work or anything about untangling biases. I would argue that you cause more pain in those systems than you do as a Southern Baptist, because at least they told us who they were.
Yeah.
It took me a long time because I'm like, okay, well, we have women leaders. We are good with that. We are like all about equality and those things. And those same people are making me feel like I am difficult. I am a bitch. I mean, I don't know how else to put it, quite honestly.
Yeah.
I am like, literally, there was someone who like got visibly frustrated with me because I did not want to babysit her kids because she thought that was part of the deal that she was getting with getting a like sub minister under her husband who had a wife. And I had no interest in babysitting her screaming children. And she was visibly mad when I said no. Yeah. And like just assumptions about things you want to do or what you want to be, or that somehow that you're incorrect, or like it's the assumptive expectation that you will be a little more stereotypically feminine, and when you do anything that's not that, they are frustrated and try a lot of things to make you more expected. And that just makes you feel like, but my natural way of being is this, and if that's wrong, then man, you couple that with original sin and born bad and evil, and then also like unlikable on top of that because I'm wrong in my way of being female. And like the people that are telling me this are the people that support women in leadership, so it must be true, because it must be that I'm wrong because they're the good guys, right? So like,
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you're right when you say that, it's the institutions and the systems that claim to be supportive. And then, if they don't put their money where their mouth is, just the pain that is being wrought, the destruction that is being wrought, I think it's more significant than the denominations that say, sorry, there's not a place for you here. I think most people would want to hear that from the get-go than be strung along and all of a sudden find pain, years down the road. Now, I will say, from a big picture perspective, it's very easy to kind of just quickly dismiss when that happens. And again, it's wrong. It's just flat out wrong. I have now served in several very different, very culturally different areas in the United States in ministry. And where I'm at currently does everything that we've talked about so much better than the other places that I've worked, and truly are putting their money where their mouth is. And this is full disclosure coming from an individual who currently works for his wife. Like, she is the head of the church and I serve underneath her as an associate. She is on multiple boards on the district. She's on multiple committees on the district. She just got back from Chicago because she's a representative of the Young Clergy Council for the entire denomination in USA, Canada. It's those are things that have been afforded to us, and we recognize the positives in that. It also kind of causes us to lament some of the other places that we've served where those possibilities would have never even been, and just that's just a reality of it. I would have been the one thrust into leadership in some way, and it's not that I would say no to those positions, but it's the fact that she wouldn't have even been considered in some of those places.
yeah.
And I think it is such a culturally defining thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's one of the things that I do lament. I do lament the places and the people who have been hurt in such a horrendous way, and continue to be hurt. And I think you're spot on. I think it's something that we need more people to have these conversations and to push back and to say, no, this is not who we are. We are a people that are united on these fronts, and this is what we believe. And if you don't, we need to sit down and have a very honest conversation.
We need to talk about the fact that it's real.
Yeah.
It needs to be because it feels like, and I've said this on the other podcast on a different episode, it feels like I'm running the race with ankle weights on and everyone is like, why aren't you going faster? There's nothing wrong. Hurry up. Like, why are you complaining? Or another race kind of reference. I'm balancing my checkbook while running a 5K. And so why aren't you doing better, Lyndsey? Well, maybe if I only had to worry about running the race, or someone else would like help me do this while I'm trying to do this, then maybe I'd be okay. But like, I'm having to do both of those things. And like, it was, I mean, we worked for a Nazarene institution, and when COVID happened, we both worked from home. And Matt flat out said to me multiple times, you do so much more work than me. So much. Like, and this was not a conversation I invited. I didn't disagree based on what I also saw when we were working from home at the time.
Sure. Yeah.
The positions we had at the time. And he worked very hard and he did a lot of good work. I just had to do even more. And I had to do it perfectly. And the standard of excellence was expected. And then when he exhibited the standard of excellence, he got promoted twice. We worked for the same institution. We both started out at entry-level positions. He's saying, you do so much more work than me. And my standard is, recognized by the VP as, you do such a good job. I left that place with only in the last year of having been there getting a $1 something more raise than when I started. And he almost doubled his salary and was promoted twice. And I'm not saying he didn't deserve that, because he absolutely did. He is so smart and so capable and charismatic and like good at a lot of really complicated things at once, in a way that I think he deserved everything he got. But I deserved something.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
if I'm doing more work and working just as hard to just as standard, like, I think I deserved something. I don't say this to put it on the people that were there at the time. It was a systems issue.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying this person who was in charge of this at that moment in time is like I don't even think that way at all. It was the culture we were all in that, like, it would have been weird had I
Sure.
gotten something.
Sure.
Like, people would be like, what's that about? Why would you do that for her? Because everyone believed that's the way it should be. And
Yeah.
that's just the way
Yeah.
it was. And so it's hard because it's like a lot of times I think people think, and those are hard conversations, and there was a hard conversation for us to have about it, because like I've expressed that to him. Like, I wouldn't have said that here if he and I had not talked about that multiple times, of like, he knows that I full throat believe he deserved everything he got, absolutely, but like, it hurt that I worked sometimes what felt like twice as hard
Yeah.
and with less resources, and got, a pat on the back occasionally.
Yeah, and it's the, you're talking about the systems and things like that. That's, I'm very certain that those systems are in place and are regulated and are maintained because they know eventually you're going to grow so tired of it that you won't speak out. And that was something that I just, even reading through this chapter, and it wasn't a long chapter, but throughout this, I kept coming back to this singular thought of these gender roles, what is so often seen as a traditionalist perspective on these things. These gender roles so easily are leading to a generation of silent victims.
Well, and that's what they wanted. Was they really, I mean, anytime I brought up anything, you're just taking things too personally. That's not what's going on here.
Yeah. And eventually you're going to stop talking about it because it's just they're not getting the point, or and I don't know what's worse, that they're not getting the point, or they are intentionally doing these things to harm you. That's and we see that all over the place. But it's why we see people like in your position and in so many of our friends and other folks that we know who just aren't not that they're not willing, it's that the system has made sure that they know that if they do speak out, no one will be there to listen.
It's learned helplessness.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a concept that if you've not taken any psychology classes, you probably don't know about. But essentially, back in the day, before there were things like animal cruelty, there were lots of tests done on animals, and they had these dogs in cages, and they would turn shocks on the floor of the cages, and there were some dogs that were able to get to safety, and there was like a non-electrical part of the floor that they could find rest and safety and not be in pain. And then there were other dogs where they couldn't, and they kept doing this, and eventually the dogs that couldn't get away stopped running around when they turned the shocks on. They just laid there because they knew it didn't matter. They were just going to have to deal with it. And that's learned helplessness. Is why fight it? I'm so tired of fighting it. It's just going to end the same way. I'm exhausted. I just take it. And it's, fortunately, in my case, I had enough support, and I'm not going to say a lot of self-esteem, but enough self-esteem and enough of the right people in the right moments to say the right words, to say, like, you don't have to stay here and put up with this. And so that led me to believe that it was real and believe that I could get better treatment or better compensation for what I brought to the table in a different environment. And so, I was able to, but I remember bringing things up and just repeatedly being told that I was just taking things too personally. And like, well, they're doing it to my person. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I am a person. It is happening to me. What do you want?
How dare you have your own feelings and your own thoughts on this situation that I couldn't possibly understand? How dare you?
This Phyllis Schlafly is kind of a third wave of this, and she's not even evangelical, but
Right.
we'll allow it if it aligns with our agenda.
Yeah.
And it's giving, at first I was like, it's giving Emily Gilmore, and then the more I read about her, I was like, oh no, this is Dolores Umbridge.
Yes.
This is
yes.
1,000% Dolores Umbridge.
Yeah.
Like, it's upsetting. But then you know what's more upsetting? I googled Phyllis Schlafly Dolores Umbridge, and there's a freaking Reddit thread of this guy saying that Dolores Umbridge is the stereotypical, like, nasty feminist. Because no, sir. She would never advocate for more rights for anyone. Like, you stop talking right now. I didn't even open it because I just read the headline and I was like, I will just
Yeah.
pop off and it's no good. But yeah, no, this woman comes along and she writes books and she also gets very heavily involved in politics.
Which
Which
I
is
will say,
so
I'm
weird.
at least, yeah, it's weird, but I'm at least glad that she recognized, hey, everything that I am saying and teaching and using is also
It's
being used for a
not.
political agenda.
Yeah, but I'm
Still sucks.
also living in a way counter to what I'm telling
Yes.
everyone else to
Yes.
do.
Yep.
What?
Yeah.
How is that fine?
Okay, so you were talking about the people figuring things out because of the logic or lack of logic in some cases. There was a moment, literally the final page on this chapter, where she's talking about how well, really at the end of the day, most of the faith comes back through the women into the family anyway. And I'm just like, I literally set the book down and I just went, what? You're the same person who just said that the man was the head of the family and should be the one responsible for the faith of the what? Like, you just said this is the man's role.
I know the facts,
but
they should be the other way. But the real truth is they're doing it, and that's fine.
I was so flabbergasted. I'm just like, just make it make sense. Like,
you
literally are saying it's both.
Yeah. No, it was a lot. It was a lot. She defended private schooling, basically trying to maintain some segregation. So she was never explicit, but honestly, the explicit jerks are like 2% of the problem in any systemic issue because we can spot them and we can say no and we can push back and we can fight and people doing egregious things. But when you say you're on the same team as me and you undermine me in the room, then it's like, why are you laughing at me so much, Marcus?
No, I almost, you talked about the explicit people being, 2% of the problem. And the first thought that came into my head is they have matching uniforms. So you can see them coming from a mile away.
It's the hoods, right?
It is the hoods and the armbands and the all kinds of other things. But, the
Highling.
Yeah, so that's I wasn't laughing at you. I was laughing at my own idiotic thoughts.
That's fair.
Welcome to my life.
That's all right.
Yeah. So at that point, again, back to full circle, was there an inherent message or something that was originally a simplistic, I don't want to say simplistic, a simpler idea, and the political spectrum ran with it and said, "Whoa, this is this thing now."
Yeah, this chapter was a doozy. We could go, this could be 3 hours of content and I wouldn't be done. But I'm just going to call it done and we're just going to say sexism is icky, but it's real and the church really, really liked it and still hasn't cleaned it out. Even when they try to say they have.
And that's at the end of all of this, there's I find myself saying, okay, now what? What can I do to try to combat all of this? And truly for me, and I feel like this is going to be the answer for the end of so many of our episodes, is if I can leave the ministries and the people and the places that I find myself in a little bit better than how I found it, then I think I've succeeded. Yeah, no,
that's kind of how I felt. It was one of those things. I originally was trying to change a system from the inside and realized it was hurting me faster than I was affecting it.
Yeah.
Simply because a lot of, honestly, of like the problem we talked about, like they don't want the influence of a me. And I realized that eventually. But I did, I got an exit interview strictly because of my affiliation with some men who were considered very important, my dad and my husband. But I used it. And I didn't hold back and I tried to make it constructive in a way of things that I thought would go on after I was not there. And I think I was somewhat heard. I don't know how much it was affected any change, but like if nothing else, I think I made that person think about things a little bit. And maybe that turned into something. But and to their credit, they were extremely gracious and did not make excuses and apologize for the experience that I had. Um there was some resistance a little bit at the end of my statement of some systemic sexism issues. But I just kind of was like, you know what? We had a lot of wins today. We'll just
Well,
say
and that's,
thanks
you
and move
know,
on.
and you know this and I know this, but we never want to be a part of a system that isn't perfect, you know, and I put that in
No.
air quotes. But like when we all of a sudden are, and it doesn't even have to be us. We don't like, I don't even have to be accused of these things, but because I am connected in some way to these things, you know, immediately we feel attacked. We feel, you know, denigrated. We feel like, oh, whoa, hold on a second. That's not me. Our walls go up, our defenses go up, and we stop listening to the other. And, you know, it sucks. I hate it. But, you know, we just have to, we have to be better. We have to.
Yeah. I think too, making the systems that we leave better than when we found them and the people we encounter the same way. And I think a part of the way we do that is like what we're doing now, but in different settings and platforms as well, and rooms, is talking about these things. So both in this way, so that hopefully people feel validated and justified and that these things are real. But also like the person who has been in those systems for so long and doesn't believe enough in themselves to go try for a better opportunity.
Yeah.
Cheer them on. Let them know they're wrong. Like, don't let your friends stay in, like, some people have learned helplessness, but they can unlearn it if you help them. Like, if you help them loudly enough and you are supportive enough of them. So I think, leaving the systems better than we found them, and the same thing with the people, and doing that, a lot of it honestly through calling out what's wrong, and saying that it's not biblical, and trying to do that with love and in the right rooms and in the right ways, I think is all we really can do. And take care of our own minds as well, to make sure we're not perpetuators of it on ourselves or on other people. And that's all we can do. And you know what? At the end of the day, if all of us are doing that little bit, that's a little bit of a lot. So anyways, this was an icky, weird chapter. I'm sure it's gonna get more fun, right? Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
You came here for laughs, right, guys? So
I know I
anyways,
did.
someone's poorly misguided. On that terrible disappointment, have a good night, guys.